Hello, I am Bo Maddox.
And I'm Ashley Chancellor.
And we are the hosts of Collateral Cinema, the only movie podcast that matters, and
Collateral Gaming.
And you are listening to Victims and Villains.
Welcome to the podcast where we talk nerd, talk hope,
and we speak nothing else. I am your co-host, Captain Nostalgia.
I'm your co-host, Black Nerd Magic, and tonight we have a little bit of a Halloween treat. Episode number 339, You're Next.
I want to meet your family.
Thanks to Mom and Dad for having us all here together.
On August 23rd.
Why would anybody do this? This wasn't a random attack. Our family's being targeted.
The hunted.
Grab anything that might make a good weapon.
Fight back.
Everything's gonna be fine.
You're Next. Rated R. August 23rd.
I just want to start this off on a weird foot. So are you saying that our show doesn't matter when it comes to movies?
Oh, I mean, it's really just a tagline to help us kind of, stand out from everybody. That's really what it is. I mean, we love all the other movie podcasts that follow us, and we hope to have quite a few of them on the show in the near future. So,
yeah, we've been friends for a little over a year now, so I just like to poke fun when I can,
That's a little tension.
Oh,
right
hey,
there.
poke away, man.
So I had the opportunity to be on your guys' Christmas episode last year, and we're going to be doing a Christmas crossover in December for some more horror, like, you do. But for those that may have never actually heard of Collateral Cinema or Collateral Gaming, give us a brief synopsis of what they can expect when they check you guys out.
Well, with Collateral Cinema, what you can expect is movie analysis from a bunch of idiots, pretty much. No, I'm just playing. We pretty much dissect movies by its cinematography, the acting, the themes, and whatever motives the director had and the writers had and everything. And we just kind of break everything down to the best of our abilities. I mean, we're not necessarily like film academics or anything. We're just a bunch of guys talking about movies, pretty much.
Yeah, we're just a bunch of jackasses.
Yeah, totally. We're a group of jackasses, and we just completely just go off on everything.
So, yeah, and if you love everything about Collateral Cinema and the way that we discuss movies, then you'll probably also enjoy my little spin-off, Collateral Gaming. I guess this is more of a cinema-focused crosscast, so... And I'm a part of the Collateral Cinema team as well, but kind of doing both, and it's a lot of fun. We were also cross-casting with you before, back on that Majora's Mask episode.
I was just about to get ready to say that if you guys want to get a little bit more of Ash's kind of broader knowledge, especially on Zelda, please go check out our Majora's Mask episode. But one of the things that I think you guys undersell in your podcast is the fact that nearly every episode there's like this unwritten rule, and you don't really notice it at a first listen. You really have to like give it like 4 or 5 listens. There's like this contest between you and the hosts. You're trying to throw as much Tommy Wiseau room references as possible, and I just have to throw that out there because I share the love of Tommy Wiseau, and for our 300th episode I made Coles watch The Room for the first time.
Oh, you made him do it, huh?
His life has never been the same.
Yeah, it was probably one of the only times I had so much fun watching a bad movie, because just how bad it was, I had to laugh at it, and it was a mighty fun to do it, and I would probably do it again, even though it's a 1-star film.
It's definitely a cultural phenomenon, and as Bo says, Tommy Wiseau is the patron saint, or one of the patron saints of our podcast. So it's something you're right, we do actually kind of try to pepper that in every episode, because that's something that brought us together even before we started podcasting, was our love of that fandom / subculture.
I remember.
Yeah.
I was going to say, sorry. I remember the first episode I listened to the show for you guys, and I think it was the Pineapple Express episode that you guys had done. And Robert got to the end, and Robert's one of the co-hosts outside of Bo and Ash, and he said, "Oh man, we made it through an entire episode and we didn't mention Tommy Wiseau," and then just like blatantly stopped the podcast to stop the discussion, just so you guys could have like a 2 or 3 minute like sidebar conversation all about Tommy Wiseau in the room.
As we are wont to do. Yeah, I mean, that's just part of the fabric of the podcast. What can I say?
It's why I love listening to you guys. So where can people find you guys online before we get into your next?
We're pretty much available wherever you can get your podcast, but mainly on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Chill Lover Radio. We are on iHeartRadio. You can find us on like Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts.
Yep, same goes for Collateral Gaming. I strove to throw it on all of the same platforms, and that's basically our goal, is to be everywhere and anywhere. So if there's a platform that we're not on, let us know.
And they'll get you there. So we'll provide links in the descriptions where you guys are listening to that, and we'll also provide a link as well for Ash's previous appearance in our Majora's Mask episode we did just a couple months ago. But I have an icebreaker question for you guys. And I couldn't help but notice this. So I think I might be one of the only guys in this conversation that this was the first time watching Your Next for me. And I am very, very it's hard to say. So Crispin's like family reunion that we see within the first act, like that is kind of how I have had past experiences with like bringing loved ones or like significant others to family meetings for the first time. So my icebreaker question for this episode is, what is the most awkward experience you've ever had bringing a significant other to a family gathering?
Oh goodness. I mean, usually our family gatherings are pretty insular. Like we don't have a whole lot of other people that come over, but I mean, we've had some awkward Thanksgivings I can remember. I don't quite remember what happened there, but usually politics is involved.
Yeah, I've had quite a few run-ins. I brought over a girl that had borderline personality disorder, an ex-girlfriend of mine, and she actually harmed herself there at my parents' house. It was I'm not trying to make light of that or anything, but that was probably, I mean, if I'm being honest, that was the most awkward situation. You know, we all had to go to the hospital together, and yeah, that was pretty crazy.
Jesus Christ.
To quote the great Ron Burgundy, that escalated quickly.
No kidding.
It did, but you know, I felt it was worth mentioning, since this is, you know, like a suicide prevention, you know, mental health focused podcast, that you know, definitely there's going to be resources out there. So if you're at your significant other's house and you feel like hurting yourself, don't do it.
No,
yeah,
no, please don't.
Yeah, what they said. In all seriousness, though, this is the reason we make this content. So there are links in the descriptions for wherever you guys are currently listening. We avidly speak out against depression, and we're trying to normalize the stigma. Deconstruct the stigma that's around mental health. And so please use those resources, because that's why we make this content. But Celeste, passing it over to you, what's the most awkward experience you've ever had with a significant other coming to a family gathering?
I'm sad to report, but I haven't really had any like really weird or any awkward things. I introduced my current girlfriend to my family earlier last year, and everything went surprisingly pretty well. I mean, the only thing that sucked is that my main family lives in Georgia, so we had to fly all the way down there. And the day that we arrived there, me and her are jet lagged, and we're sleeping in the bed. And my mom literally comes in to wake me up. She's like, "Hey, the whole family hasn't like seen you in a while. Like, come on and get up." I was like, "Mom, I've been flying for like 12 hours." And she still continued to prod and wake me up and everything, but she never woke up my girlfriend. She just only wanted me to like come in my sleep and see the rest of my family. But yeah, nothing too awkward. I think I've gotten luckier than the rest of you guys.
So I guess, not to be outdone, there's a scene in this movie where Crispin and Drake, who are the two brothers, are kind of going at it at the dinner table. And that happened between my mom and me the first time that I ever brought my wife to meet my parents. And it was like we'd only been dating, I think, for that much, like 2 months at that point. And it is just very awkward to argue with your mom about not politics, but something else that divides, and that's different religious standpoints. And my mom and me, like, we share completely very different religious standpoints, and I'm very stubborn in what I believe, and my mom's very stubborn in what she believes, and when two stubborn people meet, it is an ugly sight to be seen.
Yeah, no kidding. I've been there as well. And like I said, a lot of those awkward situations I referred to involved something like religion or politics, and it's never comfortable in any way.
So, like, one of the things that, like, I learned from it is, happy life, happy wife. You always kind of listen to your wife when you're, or girlfriend, or, whoever, when you want to, improve your life, especially when they're around your family. And so now I just kind of like refuse to talk about any of those subjects when I'm around certain people in my family because of situations ending up and escalating in that way.
Yeah, I'm thankful to say that my wife and my family have a pretty good relationship, and I'd like to keep it that way. So there are certain topics that we just don't bring up.
Yeah, that's probably for the best. Like, my wife and I have a great relationship with my in-laws, and then my wife and my parents, like, beautiful. But there are just certain things that we've agreed to, you just don't talk about, just to kind of keep that peace.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, yeah, tell me about it.
All right, so I kind of want to understand where everyone is coming from, and want to give listeners a little bit of a broader sense in kind of where we're coming from when we're talking about this movie moving forward. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-host. What are your general impressions with this movie, spoiler free?
For me, I used to think that this film was great. When I first watched it, I was just amazed how well it did in re-energizing the home invasion subgenre of horror. Because that subgenre has kind of been not really tapped into much outside of The Strangers in like the recent 10 to 15 years. So it was refreshing to see a small scale budget horror film that almost feels like a Blumhouse film before Blumhouse became prominent in 2017. And the way that it has good blood, good gore, for a small scale film. It has good suspense, good thrilling aspects. I mean, the final girl trope is done beautifully well with Sherni-Vinson. I mean, she's one of the most badass female heroines we've had in horror history, and maybe even cinematic history as well. And it's surprising that she hasn't been able to find more work. I mean, the next film she does after this is a film that pretty much feels like Crawl before Crawl, where she's playing this girl who's like a girlfriend to this guy, and they're trying to fight their way out of a great white shark. And there's a tsunami in Australia and all that. And she hasn't really done much else, but she's phenomenal in this. For me, I feel that there's a little bit of plot holes I noticed on my rewatch that kind of tampered the fun that I had with this film, because there was some scenarios and just character decisions and just aspects of the subject matter that made me think they could have did better with this. They couldn't tighten up this. They could have not made it more convenient than they did for certain characters to get killed off and others to stay alive. But overall, I think it's a really fun horror film. Like, it's something that I can see myself going back to and rewatching just to see the progression of Sherni-Vinson's character just become and just brutalize the attackers who are just coming to attack her.
I saw this movie for the first time last night. I mean, I don't really get into a whole lot of modern horror. I mean, I really, really love the old school stuff, and that was one of the first impressions I had about this movie. Is it really has that grit that old school horror has, that, I mean, you just don't see with a lot of movies these days, unless it's something like, I don't know, hobo with a shotgun, where it's like it's specifically going for that. But I mean, I really also enjoyed the characterization that they for the family itself as well. I really like. I mean, they really spend time having you get to know them, and that's really integral in a movie like this, especially in a home invasion movie. Like a good analogy to that to me is like in Funny Games. I mean, you do really get to know that family really well, that when the perpetrators of that scenario come calling, that I mean, it's much more impactful when everything goes down. And I also like the fact that it's also a slasher movie. I mean, it's a home invasion slasher hybrid. And I mean, I've always liked both genres, and to see them mashed together like this, and in a way that it doesn't really fall into a lot of the same old tropes that these types of movies go into. I mean, that was really refreshing. I was very surprised and very satisfied with this movie. I mean, I get what your co-host was saying about the plot holes, but I mean, to me, I mean, it's just the actual action and the scenario itself and all the gags. It really makes up for that. And like I said, the characterization makes up for it. I mean, it's not really what I would call a beautifully shot film, but that grittiness is exactly what was needed to make this stand out. And I mean, I would think that this movie is better than The Strangers, honestly. I mean, the Strangers, it kind of has a similar vibe, but to me, it falls flat in certain areas, especially with the characters. But here, I mean, especially with someone like Barbara Crampton involved, I mean, this is a really solid cast that they put together. And I really liked that. I liked the actual the antagonist as well. They were actually pretty well done, I thought. And they were done a little differently than what you see in these types of movies. So, yeah, that's what I think about it.
All right. Better than The Strangers. All right. This podcast just got interesting.
Oh, boy.
All right. So,
yeah. Go, Ash.
Go. Okay. So, I had a blast with this. I really did. I'm just kind of getting introduced to the horror slasher genre, and a lot of that has been through Collateral Cinema. But kind of getting to compare and contrast what we've watched together, Bo and Robert and I, and something more modern like this was good. And I thought it was well done, because a lot of more modern horror movies just don't really hold up to the level of quality, I would say. And I mean that in a sense of like quality of direction, quality of storytelling. And this really did. It really felt just like a modern day slasher. I like the home invasion feel. I like the idea that it's all, it's all in the family, so to speak. And you spend a lot of time getting to know these characters just with each other. I also enjoyed, what was I going to say? What's interesting? I will say this. I had actually seen a Simpsons short that was, and I didn't realize it until I started watching the movie, that was based off of this. And it was because it was the exact same thing, the way that some of the deaths occur and the way the kind of the plot goes. And so I remember seeing that a few years ago, and that had really intrigued me. And then that short stuck with me. And then I watched it now, and I was like, oh, that came from this. Okay, I get it now. That's what I was going to say. I like, without going into specifically what it is, without spoilers, but I do like the twist. I really did. That really came out of nowhere for me, and it was really interesting. But I guess I did kind of have my suspicions in the very beginning, but the movie did a good job of, I kind of had dropped those suspicions by the time that thing came around.
All right, so I feel like this podcast is gonna be very divided. I'm gonna kind of side with Colus, and it's not because he's my co-host. It's just because I honestly this was a first time viewing for me, and this was kind of one of those films that everyone that I think, Bo, when you were talking about it, I think you just absolutely just captured my thought and just bottled it. That this film, just visually speaking, dynamically speaking, feels like an 80s slasher film, right down to the soundtrack. And I absolutely love that aesthetic that this film brings. And I think that it's a really strong aesthetic that it's able to do. And one of the things that I have had people that are just absolute horror hounds, like just people tell me all the time that when it comes to modern horror, you need to see youre-next because it's one of these modern day game changers. And so that's all I've heard for like the last like 5 or 6 years. So finally, when Celeste and I were talking about doing this episode, I sat down to watch it, and I was sitting there and I just called things like as they were getting ready to happen. And like, I don't know, like the family dynamics, like it just seemed like the families just kind of seemed like very one dimensional. Like I didn't get into the family dynamic that you guys had. I think You're Ready or Not kind of spoiled that for me because they do the family dynamic just a little bit better. But I did like some of the twists that they had in here. This is, and to kind of piggyback off what Ash was saying, this is an extremely fun film. And so even though it can be campy, it's still really fun. And the gags in this are so good. It renewed my faith that we hadn't seen everything when it comes to murder and horror. That is what I love so much about this movie, and Sherni-Vinson is just incredible in this movie. Just kind of like the last person you expect it to kind of be this like awesome Wonder Woman of this world. And I love just the very subtle backstory that she gives about being raised in a survivalist and kind of like how that came to be. Like, that was great that they explained everything, and the attention to detail that Adam Wingard brings is really, really well done. I like some of the camera angles, and so I think there are things that are done really well in here, but things that really just kind of fall flat and fall into those home invasion slasher tropes that we've seen since the 70s and 80s that have been done by the forefathers of horror.
Yeah, definitely. I can see what you mean there. But I mean, to me, I think that the tropes are really one of the selling points here, is that I feel that they're done well. They're done well enough that, any kind of triteness to it might be kind of, erased there. But I mean, I'm just kind of partial to those types of movies anyway. So seeing those tropes was exciting for me,
Yeah, and for me, kind of seeing the same type of tropes and even seeing some of the plot holes, which I caught onto too, I kind of just chalked up to the slasher experience. I was just kind of like, I feel like that's just part of watching a slasher movie. So for me, that was easy to write off because, like you said, I was having an absolute blast and the gags were really entertaining me. So the rest of it was easy to write off and kind of just ignore.
I think one of my... Sorry, Celeste, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that, to be honest, I mean, we may complain about, horror movie tropes, but to be honest, seeing them in films, especially films as fresh as this one was, I mean, it takes on a different meaning. I mean, I enjoy and I laugh at it. It's easy for me to just kind of they're easily poking fun at it, or, they're remixing it a little bit. I mean, this film does very well with the tropes and also with the way it uses dark comedy. So, I mean, I can write those off too. My other issues with it are just more serious than that.
We'll be right back. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out.
This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us. Hey guys, we have a special treat for you. I had a chance to sit down with Aaron Saunders, one of the stars in the brand new movie The Call, which also stars Tobin Bell from the Saw fame and Lin Shaye from the Insidious movies. And you guys can actually check out our interview with Lin Shaye in our Babadook episode earlier this month. We'll provide a link in the descriptions for you guys. The Call is now available on VOD and all major digital platforms. So I hope you guys enjoy this interview with Aaron Saunders. Aaron, how you doing?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm really well. This is kind of surreal because I grew up watching you on Zoe 101, so this was an awesome opportunity.
Amazing. That's so sweet. Thanks for sharing.
No problem. One of our staff writers is a huge fan of that show. That's like his favorite show, and so when I got the email to have you on the show, I went and told him that it was going to happen, and he was super stoked on it.
I love hearing that enthusiasm. Thank you so much, especially with all this talk of the reboot coming. It's so nice to hear people still being excited about the show.
I did not know there was a reboot coming, but that's awesome to hear and to know. But this movie, The Call, is really unique in that it's not only just like slasher horror, but it also has a little bit of that element of psychological and also the supernatural as well. What kind of drew you to the script?
What drew me to the script is the fact that there is a strong emotional backstory to these characters and why they do the things they do, why they behave the way they behave. I'm really interested in horror that has a psychological element to it, a strong sense of direction to the character's actions. And Tanya herself has experienced a lot of hardship and emotional trauma, and she's turned to unhealthy coping mechanisms. And not to say that this excuses her behavior, but it certainly gives me as an actor, and I think gives viewers an understanding of what led her in the direction that she's going.
That's awesome. Yeah, there is a lot of emotional turmoil that is kind of woven in between with these characters, one of which is the horror legend herself, Miss Lin Shaye, who we had on the show
Yes.
a couple weeks back, and Tobin Bell, who most modern horror people know now from the Saw franchise. What's it like? Was it intimidating at all, like working with icons and horror legends of that stature?
I wasn't intimidated. I was really excited. I was interested in learning their process and seeing what it's like to work opposite them, and it was so fulfilling. They're really generous actors. They really lock in on you when you're in a scene with them, which is how I really like to be. And everyone has their own take as to how they approach a scene. Some actors like to go into their own world in between takes and then only be locked in on their fellow actors when the camera is rolling. But I found that both Tobin and Lynn like to stay locked in on their fellow actors in between takes, which I really like being that way. And you're able to create this little personal world together that you live in, and you just exist in that world until your task at hand is complete. And I really appreciate that about both of them.
There's a sense of intensity too in the scenes that you have with them. There's Lynn Shays, and not to give away super a lot, but she's not really present on screen all that much. And then neither is Tobin, but the two scenes that you guys do have are both key to the overarching narrative, but you can see that intensity come through both of those scenes, those key sequences.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because there are two really specific key scenes I share with Lynn, and then separately there are two really specific key scenes I share with Tobin. And to consider that while they're not on screen that much, the impact that those scenes have carries our connection to their characters throughout the whole film. We don't miss them, and I mean that in the sense that they impact you so much during the time that they're on camera that the emotional intensity of that sticks with you during all the scenes when they're not on camera. You still feel their presence and their essence around you and around the other characters and around the home, the environment they're in.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that their characters kind of ripple onto the characters of Tanya and her friends as well. And minor spoiler alert right here, because I'm curious about this. Your character is, for lack of a better word, is a final girl. And final girls have been made famous since Jamie Lee Curtis in 1978's Halloween. What's it like to step into such an iconic just archetype of that genre?
Very fun and special for me. This is my first horror film, and definitely had an awareness of that final girl iconic element. And it's exciting to step in and embody some of this tradition that has existed for women in film for so long. And I love Jamie Lee Curtis, by the way. Solid reference. She's just the best.
Halloween's one of my favorite horror movies, so anytime I get to bring it up into conversation, I just go for it.
Yes, you have great taste.
Thank you so much.
And I think something interesting about my final girl moment, and I know you're giving a minor spoiler alert, so I still don't want to give too much away because I could turn it into a major spoiler, but I won't. But she has her own darkness, and I know that's not always the case with a final girl. You know, there's a lot of purity and victimhood that often makes its way into final girls' stories, and I think it's an interesting take that Tanya has her own darkness that is uncovered as our story progresses.
And it's interesting that you bring up the backstory of that character. I think you absolutely are right. It's what helps that character of Tanya really stand out from the other castmates that are being tormented by Miss Shay and Mr. Bell throughout the course of this movie. And I mean, it goes to some dark places. As an actor, like, what was your method for preparing for that darkness?
My method was understanding to the best of my ability why Tanya behaves in the way she does. So really fleshing out her history, even the parts that say weren't on the page or aren't in the film. So I really can immerse myself in that world and just dive into it. There was a lot of sitting in my feels, for lack of a better explanation. A lot of just sitting alone in a dark, quiet spot and not speaking to anyone while I immerse myself in the sadness and the heartbreak and the desperation I know different actors have different approaches, but for me, it really is immersing myself in that environment, in that world, and just living in it to the best of my ability and allowing everything else to fall away.
Kind of talking about the backstory, there's your story and Lin Shaye's character are intertwined so integrally throughout the course of this film, and you don't really find out until the last act how. Did you guys kind of work together on developing that backstory past the script and kind of what that history would be?
We did, actually. There is a specific scene where she and I have a big showdown in the last act. And it's just the two of us. It's very intimate. It's very intense and very focused. And Lynn spearheaded this, and we together collaborated on adjusting that dialogue quite a lot, actually, because she has a strong interest in the emotional journey that brings the character to where they are. I'm very interested in that as well. So we made that scene feel to us like it came from a really authentic, emotional place, as opposed to just like saying things that sound scary, you know? And I really appreciate that she trusted me to be a part of that. And I think things are always better when they're really a collaborative experience. It's easy to feel like you have to work as an island, you know? And especially, I think, as a woman in film, it's hard to trust everyone for good reason, in my opinion. And so the fact that she trusted me to really go to that place together means a lot to me, and I think made the film all the better.
It definitely comes through on the screen, and that's so thank you so much for taking time out to answer some questions and talk about the process behind the call. How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today. Welcome back to Victims and Villains. We are now in spoiler territory, so if you guys have not seen You're Next, you guys can watch it for free right now. If you do not mind commercials, right now on Peacock as of this recording, or you guys can rent it from any of your major digital outlets. So before the commercial break, Celeste was talking about the black comedy of this movie, and one of the things that I guess for me that I took away from the impression of this film is that you had this like very serious situation with the home invasion, but yet like the way that the lines were delivered up until Felix's like turn as the villain, it just kind of seemed like we were like in this like serious setting, but the lines were being delivered by like B movie horror. Did anyone else kind of get that impression, or am I just alone in that?
I think there's a little bit of a self-awareness to it. I mean, I think that would be an apt description. I mean, like I said, I mean, this plays so many of those horror, home invasion, and slasher tropes so straight at times that sometimes it just loops around and becomes humorous, you know?
I would say, no, you're not alone. Like, I also noticed the dialogue as well. I mean, a lot of the lines did come off of cheesy, and a lot of that even came in for me in the very beginning of the movie, as we kind of got this there was a little bit of unnecessary exposition, I noted, and it was funny because when I first started watching the opening of the movie, I was like, wow, they're just getting right into it, no exposition. Like, I actually honestly like respect. And then they're driving past the house and they're like, oh, there's the guy that married the college student. I was like, oh, okay, well there goes the exposition. But it wasn't like bad. I just it was there, and I noticed that the dialogue was not as natural as I would have expected it to be throughout, but thankfully the dialogue wasn't really the focus. So
I think for me, it felt like during the actual action sequences, that's where things got a little better as far as line delivery is concerned to me. You know, I mean, when they're actually in the heat of the moment, like especially with the main final girl, Erin. But I kind of feel like, I mean, it kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, you know?
Yeah, mostly the star of these type of films is mostly the blood and the thrills. You're not really going there looking for, Oscar-winning actors and proficient dialogue readers.
As Friday the 13th has taught me many times. But no, I think they went. It felt like there was like a tonal shift. Like once it was revealed, like Felix and Z were behind all of this. That kind of was a moment where I was like, I kind of saw that coming, because you could tell the way that he would react to like his family being slayed. Like clearly he doesn't like these people, and clearly there's some kind of motive here. So like when they made the big transition, it felt like at that point it just went into like full camp. And I was cool with that. I just kind of wish that the movie would have like just established that entire tone throughout the entire course of the film.
Well, to me, it feels like, even though in the end he's still one of the antagonists, it's really more of a red herring for the actual twist, which is Crispion's involvement in everything. I mean, I think that was really what that was for. It was to kind of, cover for what was coming up next.
Yeah, there is a sense in the beginning that, I mean, for me, yeah, I felt like it was going to be it feels like it's going to be a little bit more serious. I mean, because we're having these two people, and it's kind of like they give you a little bit of like an appetizer before the big violence goes on. And yeah, a little bit does seem kind of a little bit exposition like heavy, but I just really like that they at least established all of these family members, because I mean, it's easy. It would be very easy for a film like this to just like introduce them by name, but not really give them any dynamics or their personality quirks, and then just kill them off. At least in this film, they do establish, okay, this person is successful in the family, and this person they're not living up to their potential, and these siblings don't like each other. These siblings really love each other, protect each other. I really thought that was good. The good part of the beginning of it.
I also think too, like I thought from the opening scene where you had the neighbor that was the couple, and you just walked into the youre-next, and you saw the blood, and then he just gets it right in the forehead. Like, I was completely like cool with that. I was like, all right, we're gonna go here. Like, that sounds awesome. And then once they start like terrorizing the family as that we spend all of this movie with, and you start to like learn like little details like that they've been like studying them, and like they're very tactical. Like one of the best gags in this is the daughter's like, all right, I'm gonna go run out to the car, and she just kind of gets like just her throat slit by like a fishing wire. It's so subtle, but it's such a brilliant gag, like that they've really established these monsters as just like really tactical antagonist, and I think that's what made it so effective. And it kind of almost felt like we were going back to that Halloween motive where you didn't really know what made Michael Myers tick and why he hunted and why he killed people. That's kind of what makes those movies so scary. And like Scream says, like, it's the millennium, like motives are, non-incidental, like you don't need them anymore. And once that twist with Felix, I'm paying you guys so that I can get this inheritance, it just kind of it cheapens the movie, I feel like, a little bit for me, where I was really excited about kind of stepping back into that old school non-motive, like just terrifying, scary slasher, and then they had that happen.
Well, I will. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Ash.
Well, I was gonna say that for me, like once the twist is revealed and you see that Felix and Z are the killers, and that motive is taken, or the lack of motive, is taken away. I feel like that's where the movie starts to transition into, and you'll notice this, you get less and less shots of Aaron and more shots of the killers, and it's almost like Aaron is the killer, and Aaron is the one that's slowly, finishing them off. So I almost feel like that was intentional. At the moment in the movie where we understand the killer's motives and we understand them, the entire movie shifts, and it's her hunting them, or at least that's kind of what I took away from it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it did become a hunted becomes the hunter kind of, or the hunter becomes a hunted type of thing, or vice versa, Excuse me.
And she was a badass. I mean, golly, what was her name? Sherni-vinson.
Yes.
Yeah. Sherni-vinson. Yeah. She is a great actress. I'm surprised I haven't seen her in much else because she really, really, really believably portrayed that role. I mean, she was awesome. She was the, archetypal final girl. And it was just from the moment that she started just getting things together and getting her shit together and taking care of anybody and knowing exactly what to do, I was rooting for her. And then we gotta mention the blender scene, because that was, in my opinion, the high point of the movie. It was just like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, that was a new one on me. I mean, like I said, I've seen quite a bit of horror gags, and that one, oh man, I mean, I'm trying to think of any other blender gags I've seen in horror movies. I mean, I think like Unfriended had one, but that was kind of weak. Dead Alive had the use of a blender very, very, very briefly as well. But this one, like, I mean, it was just really raw. And it was a very unique way of using a blender as a weapon. Like first as a cudgel, pretty much, just as a blunt weapon, and then just to make mincemeat of the top of his head. And with Z, she ended up stabbing her on the top of the head. So I mean, both antagonists go down with blows to the top of the head, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this film that makes it so great, especially when we were talking about the final girl, is that in the beginning, I mean, it just seems like insurmountable. It seems like that, Sherni-Vinson's character, she's up against just something that's unbeatable. I mean, these guys, they're out in the woods. They can shoot pretty good. I mean, the first guy they killed, they just shoot him right through the window and get him in the head. And so, and they don't know where they are. It's dark outside. And, they could be from anywhere. And what makes it so great is that eventually we start seeing gradually the momentum start to shift. We see that she is a character, the final girl, Sherni-Vinson's character. I think her name is Erin. Yes, it's Erin. So we see Erin. She starts to do her best Home Alone impression. She starts setting up traps and creating makeshift weapons. And it's like, these are things I didn't get to see when I saw Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis. Yes, she's the final girl, but you don't really get to see her like have this type of like this action hero moment. It's just her just like running around and screaming and just hoping that the killer doesn't get her and just waiting for like somebody to come through with a gun and shoot Michael Myers. But with this one, it's Erin. She's taken to the battle to these guys, and eventually she bends them down to her will. She's able to catch them in the right spots, and she just turns the tables on everybody, including the family who and her douchey boyfriend, who even tries to get her killed because he wanted some money.
Bo, correct me if I'm wrong, but the very first like montage scene within horror of a final girl was Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street, correct?
Yeah. As far as how we know it, excuse me, as far as we know it in modern times, yeah, she is definitely a final girl 100%. And sherni-vinson's character, I think that she transcends that a little bit, honestly.
Yeah, you definitely get some Nancy vibes off of her, and I think that I want to, I guess, like, I want to touch on something that, Bo, you had brought up, and then I want to jump back into sherni-vinson. But the blender scene is just exquisitely shot as an action sequence, first off. It's the way that it's like raw and shot, it just kind of seems like it's something that you would kind of see in like a John Wick movie, which wasn't a sequence I thought that I would be experiencing with this movie. And then once you kind of get to that transition of the gag with the blender and then Z biting the bullet, for lack of a better word, I think it's such a beautiful shot altogether, and it just culminates in that brutal blender shot. And just at the end where she's confronted with Crispin, he's like, where's Felix? And she's like, I killed him with a blender. Like, just to hear it said out loud is like, it sounds kind of goofy, but it's such an awesome sequence.
Yeah. I know, and especially with the whole angle of her on the phone with him, and he's calling in, and he's just like, hey, Felix, is it done? Is it done? I mean, just that realization, like, oh shit, Crispian was a part of it. I mean, I think that twist, like I said, that's the real twist of this movie, and it was a little better hidden. And the way that blender scene kind of transitioned into that was rather well done, I think.
Brilliant, yeah. Like that scene, like I was like, all right, I called Felix and I called Z, because even from the very first time that you meet Z, you understand that like she's not a traditional girl in any sense of the word. The fact that she wants to have sex on top of a dead body, kind of throws that in there out there that.
Total freak, man. Jesus.
One of the nastiest scenes I've seen like recently.
Holy shit!
Oh, you think that was nasty?
Yes.
Right, we're going to be doing necromantic this season, so I can tell you about nasty.
Yeah, I thought what was really cool was right at the end, when she realizes about Crispin, and just seeing that realization come over her, and then he just slowly starts walking towards her, and he's kind of realizing that there's not much to go on here, and he's explaining, and it's not real clear if he actually did intend to keep her alive or not, because he kind of pulls the whole, he kind of backpedals on himself. And he does, in fact, he's like, oh, well, Z would have been the witness. And you're like, okay, dude, it's kind of like that moment when Trump was like, well, even if they get a ladder, how are they going to get down? Oh, well, they could use a rope, Not to get political, but that's just what that reminded me of. Anyway, but I do like the moment where, he's over explaining, and then she just kills him. And you can tell that there's not... because he asks why, and she just says, 'cause fuck it. And you realize that there's not even really a sense of revenge. There's no moral implications necessarily. It's just continuing the cycle of violence, And
then she's just shot by a police officer, and that leads into that final gag, which unfortunately we don't really get to see it happen in full force. Like, I was kind of waiting for that to come into play, but, and then finally it comes into play at that last moment, but then you just get the blood splatter, and then you're next. It's like, I mean, that to me, that is classic horror ending material right there. That's classic.
100% classic. And I mean, the transition between like the sledgehammer coming down to that transition was just beautiful. And then adding the punk rock music at the end, I was like, all right. All hail the 80s.
Yeah, and I like it's almost like it was kind of out of nowhere. I mean, you did see her set up the trap, but it was kind of out of nowhere, and it kind of reminded me of the ending of that movie Pieces, kind of, where just all of a sudden the killer's hand comes out, he's supposed to be dead, and just grabs that dude by the nuts and just rips it off. Oof. It's like just that kind of out of nowhere ending where you're just like, holy shit, what the fuck?
Yeah, so I want to backtrack just a little bit to something that Celeste was talking about with Sherni-Vinson and just how good she is in this movie. I think that's something that we've all just talked about, like, is like one of the strongest elements in this. And I want to transition specifically to the scene where her and Z are setting up the traps with the boards and the nails for the robbers to kind of come in, and she goes, well, how did you kind of like how are you so good at this? Like, how are you so calm? Because she basically just saw her like brutally kill someone, and then she gives the backstory about how her father was she grew up in a survivalist compound, and that cycle of like violence and like preparation of like just it being normal is something that was ingrained to her. And I want to use that as like an allegory for normalizing mental health. One of the things that I know that we've been trying to do, maybe not as a podcast, but as a nonprofit, has been to take the conversation and kind of start having, conversations with kids now that are young enough to kind of understand the difference between like happiness and sadness, which are, ultimately sadness is a degree of depression, and kind of like the importance of normalizing mental health conversations and suicide prevention conversations now in children, and kind of how important that is for them growing up, so that way when they are handling or are around depression or anxiety or suicide, that it's not this stigmatic thing that they feel like they can't talk about or they can't address, because she just kind of talks about it with ease. And I think that that's where we kind of need to see. I kind of wanted to hear how you guys would comment on that.
I mean, I don't know, actually. I'm not really sure how to really put it there. I mean, I guess that you can kind of see where her previous experiences with her dad may have been just a little traumatizing in some ways, because, I mean, those survivalist types, let me tell you, man, they can be pretty difficult people to deal with. And I can only imagine one of them being, your father or your mother, and just the outright baggage that you would have to carry after all of that. And I mean, yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, really. I mean,
so I guess like not to cut you off, but like one of our writers talks about when he was younger, he uses this allegory for this example for needing glasses, and he thought that like his vision was just kind of getting worse, and like it was really blurry for a long while, and he just had the mindset that everyone else saw the world in that setting, that everyone else kind of saw it as blurry. And I think that that's kind of how kids are to a certain degree, is you just kind of you grow up around what that would be considered normal. Because I mean, when you look at Erin, for one, she was raised in an environment to where the survivalist and to kind of like fend for yourself, that was a normal, and maybe even violence to a certain degree, that was a normal environment for her until her and her mom came to the States at 15. And then she kind of had this like almost like Katie from Mean Girls revelation, to where the rest of the world isn't like homeschooled. They, their fathers are the inventors of toaster strudels, and they hang out with girls who are mean and plastic and fake, and that's just what it is in the hierarchy of high schools. Go check out our
fetch.
It's not. Go check out our Mean Girls episode though. That is fetch. But I think that's kind of in the same way, is that if you're trying to normalize a trait within a child, you have a greater chance of them seeing it as normal, and then once they kind of get around it and see that, oh, the world's not this way, but I still have these skills in the back of my pocket. It's a very crucial thing, and it's a very large step into kind of destigmatizing and deconstructing the stigma around suicide and depression and addiction, stuff like that. And Ash, not to kind of throw you under the bus, but being a father, I mean, how do you talk to your kids about stuff like mental health?
Well, she's only 18 months, so it's kind of difficult, but it is definitely something that I'm looking into at the moment. It's something that I'm watching out for, because as her personality is starting to develop, I'm seeing some of these traits like anxiety, and my instinct is, I know how that feels, and I don't want her to feel that way. So it's definitely something that I'm starting to become more and more aware of over time. But I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to approach the subject. I just hope that we can have an open and transparent relationship, and that's something that we can broach, that I'm someone that she can come to, regardless of how she's feeling. So I definitely don't want to have a family dynamic like the family in this movie, because there was kind of this unspoken toxicity. And it's weird because the mom and the dad seem nice. I can't think of any reason, but I mean, did anyone else pick up on that? It was just sort of unspoken, but you could see that they felt different about Felix and Crispin, and ultimately Felix and Crispin are the ones that were behind this. So that speaks volumes, right?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, you see that a lot on certain support groups, like on Reddit. Like there's a support group called Raised by Narcissists. And I mean, a lot of what is being described here, I mean, you see in a lot of those posts, like especially when it comes to the whole normalization of certain behaviors and certain, patterns of abuse and whatnot. I mean, it's very prevalent there, and it's laid bare. And I totally get what y'all are saying there.
And you could tell that Drake, was kind of a favorite child, and he's the one that's kind of more of a dick than the rest of them, and Amy felt like she never really had the opportunity to show herself.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into how she ends up dying, actually, because I mean, she's just like, you never give me credit for anything, and then finally she's like I'm a fast runner, you can give me credit for that, and that kind of leads to her demise.
Yeah, it's a very dysfunctional family. It's kind of like that story we always see. These privileged families that have a lot of money. You expect for the family, to be happy and they get along, but they're just very torn inside. I mean, there's obvious favorites. I mean, Caspian and Felix are the obvious black sheeps. They're the ones who are, in the eyes of the other family members, that they're an embarrassment. And so you can kind of understand, not justify it, but you can understand why they would feel so useless enough to go out and hire some ex-military people to come and kill their family.
Yeah, it's not really surprising, right?
That dynamic is very subtle. I actually liked the way that it was demonstrated in the movie, as it wasn't in your face. You just kind of understood it through the character interactions and through, sometimes the lack of dialogue.
There's one scene in particular where, so Aaron and Crispin get to the house before any of the other kids do, and basically there's an aside where they're getting ready, the two of them are getting ready for bed, and Aaron says something to the extent of, your parents seem cool, and then it's kind of like, wait till tomorrow when everyone else is here. And so you kind of get that feeling that you're going to get into some dynamics that are interesting. And man, Ash, I'm so glad you brought up Drake, just not to jump transitions, but let's go back to gags. Like, this dude just was like Superman of this movie. He just did not want to die.
He's like the killer in Slumber Party Massacre.
Yeah, for real. I love the fact that like his Felix is down there and he's just like taking like knife, screwdriver, like 5 or 6 like weapons, and he's just like, why won't you die? This guy has like so much Vicodin in his system. He's like, I am invincible.
And he kind of just lets him do it. Wasn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Stood there and just like was allowing him to just stab him, man. It's like, and he's struggling at it. I mean, he just put like so many knives into this dude. It just like stood there, and it's like, you're bad at this, man. Like, there's a reason why you hired the ex-military to come and do your job, because you're not a good killer. You're not.
Yeah, no kidding. But I mean, I thought that what I saw in Drake's eyes there was it definitely kind of shock, but also just kind of that how could you face, like, what is this? Are you kidding me? How could you do this? You know, I mean, it's very obviously he's very, very hurt physically, but also just hurt emotionally by it in those final moments of his life.
So like I had a big problem with his character as a whole, because he just kind of seemed like he was the favorite, obviously, and he just kind of seemed like he was just there to like judge, because he points out the fact that Aaron used to be one of Crispin's students and it was unprofessional, and then he makes a comment, which is one of the funniest parts in this whole movie, is they're trying to, when the crossbows start coming in, they all call out for the police and they all have no signal, and he's like, Felix says something to the extent of, oh, they're cell phone jammers, they're jamming our signals, they're illegal, but you can get them on the internet for like $30. And Drake just points out, he's like, why are you bringing up all of your shady activity? Like, he just kind of seems like he's constantly just, like, there to put everyone down. And so, yeah, I don't know. He was kind of the one guy I was kind of like, he kind of seems justified a little bit. But he also kind of seemed out of character for him that, like, as they're going into the basement, him and Felix, he's like, we got to go find Crispin, bro. Like, I need to do this. And I need to find my wife too. Like, it just kind of seemed like out of character to be like caring all of a sudden.
Yeah. I mean, in many ways, I feel like at first he's kind of a foil for Crispin in a way at first.
Maybe.
You know, I mean, I get it kind of ties into what you're saying there. He is pretty much there just to provide the tension or the toxicity, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely the catalyst for a lot of the problems. I do like another character that he treats stickishly very early on in the film is the filmmaker, Tariq. And I thought it was funny because it just seemed like such a self-aware joke about filmmaking.
Yeah, that is actually Ty West, by the way. I believe he did The House of the Devil.
Okay.
Nice.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
That's Ty West.
I thought it was funny, the joke that Drake gave him, where he said, he asked him, like, so what kind of films you do? He's like, oh, I do underground films. He's like, do they show these films, like, underground? And then guys like, no, they show them above ground. But
He's just so glib, man, I swear.
And he kind of has this pretentious aura, right? Like, you can tell, but, Drake is also just being a douche to him, and it's really funny. And then that's right when shit hits the fan, right? That as soon as that is over is when the first crossbow bolt comes in.
Man, you guys are missing, like, one of the best parts of that whole rib is, like, the whole point where he's like, you doing any commercials? Commercials are the reason why I watch TV.
Yes. Yeah, that's like his full understanding of the art of filmmaking is commercials. Oh, God.
Though, sorry, Carlos, go ahead.
And then, like, he asked him, like, what do you do? He's like, I do documentaries. He's like, well, they have documentary commercials. I was like, what?
Documentary commercials? Like what? Is there some Super Bowl commercial that we're not aware of that was kind of like that? I mean...
narrated by Morgan Freeman.
Exactly.
Oh man, it's 2020. It's got to be narrated by Tony Todd. We established that in Candyman.
Yeah, there we go.
No, so weird aside, I think I might be the only person in this conversation that has seen more recent commercials, but Mars Candy has been doing like short Halloween films that have actually been pretty good this year. So
Really?
yeah, it's super weird. Like my wife and I were watching one the other night, and they're like these like 3-minute short horror movies, and that just end in advertising candy. Like it's super bizarre. They did one about like a werewolf and stuff like that. It's super weird. But just a weird aside real quick. Go check them out. I highly recommend them.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't really watch TV anymore, so I'm not even aware of any of that. Damn.
Got my hands on a little bit of everything.
Yeah, only time I use TV is for football, basketball, and that's it.
and you can stream most of that stuff online as well, like even
Exactly.
on YouTube.
I want to go back real quick to the toxicity in the family dynamic, because I feel like for me, like personally speaking, like I came from what I would argue sometimes was a toxic background, and I know that over the past 10 years of kind of like doing this reboot of myself, like I've had to unlearn a lot of things, like racist like tendencies that like I didn't know that I had until like a few years ago, like the homophobic thoughts that I had, or like transphobic thoughts, and just kind of stuff like that. And just really how you never understand how much impression the environment you sprout up in has until you get out in the real world, and it really shapes a lot of that stuff. And so kids are extremely impressionistic in that way, and it's like very subtle. It's kind of almost like subliminal messaging. And toxicity is it's just like blindly just kind of like feeding your kids drugs for 18 years and not realizing the harmful side effects of it.
Brother, I feel you 100% on that, man. I mean, I kind of have the same background there. I mean, I was homeschooled. I mean, that should tell you a lot right there, like of the Christian evangelical variety. So, I mean, I totally get what you're saying there, and especially with the more racist and homophobic, tendencies that you have. Yeah, I mean, it was initially a struggle to actually drop a lot of that. I mean, my family also has a right-wing background, so I mean, yeah, trying to move away from that. I mean, as further like leftward politically and more tolerant as I've become over the years, like in my old age. I mean, yeah, I mean, that is profound. And I can say that is truly an experience that myself and a lot of other people have.
I think the ending scene where we see essentially Caspian just like laying his whole plan out there, and the reason lay in that he's a struggling writer, and his dad actually grills him in the beginning of the film, asking him about fellowship he failed to get. He's like, well, writers maybe didn't get any awards or merit, but they did at least get a fellowship. And Caspian gives him kind of a little bit of a disgusted look, well, not disgusted, but just like a really a side look, and that kind of lays down the little conflict they have between themselves. And so Caspian sees that he's like laying his plan to Erin, telling her like, hey, we could be millionaires now, we can go travel, and you have student loan debt, and I'm a struggling writer, so we'll be able to live and we'll be able to do whatever we want. And Erin is just asking him, but well, did you think that I wasn't going to get killed too? Like, did you have me in mind to also be one of the victims? And he's like, no. There was an agreement. Like, there was an agreement we had with the killers. I told them to leave you unharmed, and that everybody else was going to die. And then, you were supposed to be the witness. You're supposed to be the last witness to everything. And for me, I could see why this guy didn't take part in enacting any of these plans. I mean, he's just a thinker. I mean, it sounds good when he explains to himself what he did this for, but when you peel it back, it's like, how did you expect to be able to go and travel? Like, don't you think the cops, when they go and investigate why your family died and they see you taking trips and buying things, aren't they going to like put two and two together? So, I mean, it's really just the villain who thinks he's the smart one in the room, but not really thinking all the things through.
Also, let's not forget the fact that every time that they literally kill someone, they leave the weapon and the victim with their DNA on it. And
all
then
the
there's
time.
all the time. There's even a part where like one of them bleeds out and he's like, "No, dude, like you don't want to bleed out and get your DNA all over it." And it's like, bro, you've already left your DNA on the neighbor's house and all over this house. Like, when is this like a thing that you care about right now?
But don't worry, he's going to clean it up later. He told you he's going to clean it up later.
Bro, you better burn that with fire.
You know, it's like I was explaining earlier. You can kind of see where that plan is starting to fall apart and where he's saying, you know, when he's saying, oh, well, you were going to be left alive. It's almost like he's having to rationalize it to her and he's making that up. And, you know, like I said, he even physically states that Z was going to be the witness. You know, he lets that slip out. And so, you know, I kind of feel like when I was listening to him, when I was watching him say it, I kind of believed him. But then thinking about it in retrospect, I was like, nah, he wasn't going to leave her alive. Like, come on.
Yeah, he was totally bullshitting all the way. Like, I mean, I didn't believe him 1 second when he was trying to explain himself. Like I mean, he's a coward for one. Mm-hmm. I mean, a total coward. I mean, you can just see it in his character, like, right away. And, I mean, and it really, it informs his relationship with Drake, and it really informs his role in this whole scenario.
Also, too, there's a point where, to call back to the nail scene between Z and Aaron, she actually tells him that Crispin doesn't know about her survivalist background. So when he was planning all of this out, he had no, like, she was kind of like the wild card. Like, he didn't know any of this in his defense. So maybe he could have intended her to be the witness or to, like, be the, you know, the sole survivor of this bloodbath. But he didn't know about the whole, like, oh, hey, I grew up in a survivalist compound and I kick butt and I'm going to eat these guys for breakfast. Like, he didn't know any of that stuff was going to happen. Even calls it weird as he's kind of giving this exposition of the evil plan, so to say.
Yeah, he never really considered that particular scenario out at all. He didn't anticipate any of that.
So, well, not at all.
Not at all. No, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that he was going to have his girlfriend killed. But, you know, then again, his girlfriend is Erin, who is just a total badass. So,
I mean, his plan was like almost like the Hoover Dam. I mean, it's like, hey, ex-military guys, my family, they're very vulnerable. I mean, they're not going to really be able to defend themselves. This should be a home run. But there's always the Eagle Beaver that collapses the dam, and Aaron was the Eagle Beaver that he just did not see. So I guess I can give him a little bit of credit for coming up with a pretty good plan against his mostly defenseless family. But I mean, at the same time, I mean, I don't know what he expected to do. I mean, usually in these cases, like especially there was a case in the 90s, the Menendez Brothers, if anybody knows about those guys.
I remember the Menendez Brothers very well. I remember that entire trial.
Like, they ended up, you know, killing their parents, and then they immediately went out and started, like, buying cars and just spending a lot of money. And it's like, what did you expect? Like, the cops are going to put two and two together. I mean...
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, if they were smart, they would have just laid low. But, you know, I mean, in the end, I personally think that there's no such thing as a truly brazen and intelligent criminal. Every criminal makes some kind of mistake, you know, somewhere along the line. So.
Well, because if you were going to calculate it, you would calculate that in the end you would get caught.
Yeah, I mean, it's all movie bullshit, really.
Yeah, DNA and investigations never really take full effect in the film. It's just like, oh, they can just get away with it. They just traveled to a different country. You know?
Yeah, like for instance, the ending of Silence of the Lambs, kind of. It's like, I mean, how the fuck did Hannibal Lecter really evade the authorities after escaping prison?
I know the last time we see him is on the ambulance, but it's like, well, how did you get out of that? Like, how did no one see you?
Yeah, exactly.
So, Josh, you have any ending thoughts
about this ending, or just in general?
I mean, just in general. I mean, you can go off. You can go freestyle this if you want.
No, I think I've said all about all this movie that I wanted to say. Unless there's anything that Ash or Bo you guys wanted to talk about.
I just want everybody to watch this movie because I was just so pleasantly surprised by it. Like I said earlier, I don't really watch a whole lot of modern horror except for like the ones that everybody's like really like putting to the forefront, like your Babadooks, your It Follows, what's another one, your Springs and whatnot. But I mean, this one, I mean, it was very under the radar for me, and finally getting to see it and getting to experience just all the excitement behind it. I mean, I really liked it. I recommend this movie 100%. And yeah, I still think it's better than The Strangers. So
No, it's not. The Strangers. Anyways, when we talk about the first one, great movie. The second one, the list is a mile long of all the issues I have with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so go check that out. All right. Well, one more time, where can people find you online?
You can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, Chill Lover Radio, LoftyCast Radio. You can find us on where else? You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and also check us out on Patreon as well. We have lots of film commentaries there, and our tiers start at $1. So support us there and give us a 5-star review on Podchaser as well and on Apple Podcasts. That will help us move up the charts, which we've charted a couple of times overseas, but I mean, we're waiting to hopefully chart here in the States. So yeah, definitely give us as much support as you can. And we appreciate every single listener. We appreciate everybody who follows us on Twitter, especially. And yeah, I mean, look us up. We're pretty much anywhere you can find us on any podcatcher.
Yeah, and check out Collateral Cinema's Halloween special. We just got out our episode on Night of the Living Dead, and that was a lot of fun. We have an upcoming episode on Spider-Man 3, right?
Oof.
Yeah, and we should have somebody from Ghost of the Stratosphere, formerly Ghost of the Stratosphere, joining us with that. So.
I hear you. I wanted to do Spider-Man 2, but then I was like, you know what? Spider-Man 3 is so much more meme-worthy. It's terrible.
Terrible. Spider-Man 3 isn't that bad. It's decent. It's decent.
It's just so compared to the other two films, it really drops the ball.
Yeah,
it does.
I think the meme quality. Come on.
Oh yeah, I think it's emo Peter Parker. Yes.
That's why we're doing it. As far as Collateral Gaming goes, you can find us wherever you listen to Collateral Cinema, available practically wherever you get your podcasts. We are actually doing our own episode on Majora's Mask as our season premiere, and we're going to be doing our Halloween special on Until Dawn. So check that out and give us a listen. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or feedback on your platform of choice if you enjoy it.
All right, so you guys have homework with this episode. Go check out Collateral Cinema. Go check out Collateral Gaming and Victims and Villains. Give us all 5 stars wherever you guys are. Follow us all. Speaking of social media, Mr. Black Nerd Magic, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and letterboxd.com under the alias Black Nerd Magic. You can find me on Facebook as Celeste Davis, Caless, and also check out feelingfilm.com and check out the Feeling Film podcast along with Feeling Film Black Label.
All right, well, you guys can find me under Captain Nostalgia over at Letterboxd. You guys can find us everywhere at Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, Letterboxd, wherever you guys get your podcasts from. Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Spotify, Amazon, and more. You guys can go to victimsandvillains.net where you guys can find all of those links, past episodes, and most importantly, suicide prevention resources. And until next time, remember to keep talking nerd, talking hope, speaking nothing else, and remember, as the blood on the wall says, you're next. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, y'all.